Denver, Colorado had always been a city of contrasts, where the crisp mountain air met urban ambition, where family values intertwined with business dreams. It was here, on an unseasonably warm October morning in 2004, that Brian Donovan kissed his wife Rebecca goodbye, hugged his two young children, and walked out the door of their suburban home. No one could have known that by nightfall he would vanish without a trace, leaving behind only questions that would haunt his family for years to come. The morning had started like any other. Brian, a successful commercial real estate developer, had been excited about a new project downtown. At 37, he had built Pinnacle Development from the ground up alongside his college friend and business partner, Nathan Weiss. Their company had transformed several neglected downtown blocks into thriving commercial centers, earning them respect in Denver's business community and providing a comfortable life for their families. "He called me around noon," Rebecca would later tell police, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "He said he was heading to meet Nathan for lunch at Marcello's to discuss a new investor. He sounded normal, excited even." That phone call, barely 3 minutes long, would be the last time she ever heard her husband's voice. By 7 p.m., with no word from Brian and his phone going straight to voicemail, Rebecca's concern had transformed into a gnawing panic. Their children, Emma, 8, and Tyler, 6, kept asking when Daddy was coming home. She called Nathan, who claimed Brian had cancelled their lunch meeting at the last minute, saying something had come up. He suggested Brian might have gone to see a property site alone. The disconnect between Brian's call to Rebecca and Nathan's story planted the first seed of suspicion, though at the time she was too worried to dwell on it. The police report filed that night reads like so many others: white male, brown hair, blue eyes, last seen wearing a charcoal grey suit. Officer Martinez noted that the family seemed stable, finances appeared secure, and there were no obvious signs of marital problems. "Probably just a misunderstanding," he assured Rebecca. "Most missing adults turn up within 48 hours. But Brian Donovan didn't turn up. His silver BMW was found the next morning in the parking garage of their office building, keys still in the ignition, his briefcase sitting untouched on the passenger seat. Security footage showed him entering the building at 11:43 a.m., but there was no footage of him leaving. It was as if he had simply disappeared into thin air within the concrete and glass structure he had helped design. As days turned into weeks, the investigation intensified. Detective Sarah Harlow, a veteran of Denver's Missing Persons Unit, took a special interest in the case. "Something doesn't add up," she told her partner after interviewing Nathan Weiss for the second time. "He's too composed, his answers too rehearsed." But nothing concrete pointed to foul play, and Nathan had an alibi for the afternoon in question. A series of meetings with contractors, verified by multiple witnesses. The company's financial records showed Pinnacle Development was thriving. There were no large insurance policies, no suspicious bank transfers, nothing to suggest a motive for harm. The detective's instincts screamed that there was more to the story, but evidence remained elusive. For Rebecca, life became a cruel limbo. Was she a wife or a widow? Should she hold on to hope or begin to grieve? The children's questions became harder to answer as time passed. "Maybe Daddy had to go away for a while," she would tell them, the words hollow even to her own ears. 6 months after Brian's disappearance, Rebecca noticed Nathan becoming increasingly involved in company decisions without consulting her, despite Brian's shares now being under her control. When she questioned certain financial moves, Nathan would smile reassuringly and say, "Brian would have wanted it this way," a phrase that began to sound less like comfort and more like manipulation. By the 1-year anniversary of Brian's disappearance, the case had gone cold. The candlelight vigil held downtown drew fewer attendees than the previous memorial events. Media interest waned. Detective Harlow was assigned to new cases, though she kept a photo of Brian Donovan pinned to her bulletin board, a silent promise not to forget. Life continued its relentless forward motion. Emma and Tyler grew taller. Rebecca found part-time work as an interior designer to supplement the income from Brian's investments. Birthdays and holidays came and went, each one a painful reminder of absence. And all the while, Nathan Weiss continued to expand Pinnacle Development, breaking ground on their most ambitious project yet, a gleaming office tower that would forever change Denver's skyline. What no one knew then was that buried beneath the foundation of success, secrets lay waiting. And like the Rocky Mountains that loomed in the distance, some truths remain hidden until the light hits them just right, revealing what was there all along. For years, Rebecca Donovan lived in the shadow of uncertainty. She'd maintained Brian's home office exactly as he'd left it, project blueprints still unfurled on his desk, coffee mug with a faded ring stain, family photos arranged in perfect symmetry. Sometimes she'd sit in his leather chair, close her eyes, and try to sense some clue he might have left behind. But the room remained stubbornly silent, offering no answers. It was during the 8th year after Brian's disappearance, on a rainy April afternoon in 2012, that Emma, now 16 with her father's blue eyes, asked the question that would change everything. "Mum, did anyone ever look through Dad's old emails? The ones from before?" The simplicity of the question stunned Rebecca. The police had examined Brian's work computer, of course, but his personal email accounts had been largely overlooked. That evening, with Emma and Tyler watching anxiously over her shoulders, Rebecca logged into Brian's old personal email, using a password combination they guessed together, their anniversary followed by the children's birth years. Most of the inbox contained what you'd expect: newsletters, family correspondence, billing notices. But in a folder labeled Acquisition Notes, Rebecca found a series of exchanges between Brian and a private investigator named Michael Torres. The emails were dated September 2004, just weeks before Brian's disappearance. "Need thorough background on NW, looking for anything unusual in financial history, particularly offshore. Urgent and confidential. NW Nathan Weiss." The next morning, Rebecca called Detective Sarah Harlow, who had since been promoted to lieutenant but had never forgotten the Donovan case. "I need to show you something," Rebecca said, her voice steadier than it had been in years. "I think Brian was investigating Nathan before he disappeared." Harlow reactivated the case quietly, careful not to alert anyone at Pinnacle Development. She tracked down Michael Torres, now retired and living in Arizona. "Brian hired me because he found discrepancies in some of their project financings," Torres explained over a secure line. "He suspected Nathan was siphoning money, but he needed proof before confronting him. I was supposed to meet him the day after he vanished to share what I'd found." "And what exactly did you find?" Harlow asked, pen poised over her notebook. "A pattern of small transfers to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Nothing huge, 50,000 here, 75,000 there, but it added up to nearly 2 million over 3 years. With this new lead, Harlow assembled a small team to dig into Pinnacle Development's finances over the past decade. What they discovered was a sophisticated scheme of embezzlement and fraud that had grown bolder after Brian's disappearance. Nathan had been systematically inflating costs on their projects, pocketing the difference, and hiding the money through a network of offshore accounts. "He had the perfect cover after Brian vanished," explained the forensic accountant, assisting with the case. As the surviving partner with the grieving wife, as a passive shareholder, he had nearly unlimited control. Who would question his authority or decisions? Meanwhile, as the investigation quietly gathered momentum, Nathan Weiss had become one of Denver's most prominent business leaders. His name appeared regularly in the society pages, photographed at charity galas with his much younger second wife. The Pinnacle Tower, now complete, had won architectural awards, and he was in negotiations to expand into neighboring states. In the Donovan home, Rebecca had finally begun packing away some of Brian's belongings, not to forget, but to make peace with his absence. Tyler, now 14, had recently told her he could barely remember his father's voice, a confession that broke her heart but also strengthened her resolve to move forward. Then came the discovery that shifted everything from financial crime to something far more sinister: While examining Pinnacle's records, investigators found that Nathan had purchased a remote property in the mountains outside Denver just 2 weeks before Brian's disappearance. The purchase had been made through one of his shell companies and never disclosed in any company records. More suspicious still, he had hired a construction crew to pour a large concrete slab on the property the very week Brian vanished. When Harlow presented this information to Rebecca, the implication hung heavy in the air between them. "You think Brian is there?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to find out," Harlow replied gently. "We've secured a warrant to search the property, but I wanted you to know first." The mountain property, tucked away on 20 acres of dense pine forest, had a small cabin that appeared unused. But ground-penetrating radar revealed an anomaly beneath the concrete slab behind the structure. Something large and dense buried several feet down. As investigators prepared to break through the concrete, Rebecca made a difficult decision to keep Emma and Tyler away from the news until they knew for certain what had been found. The children had lived with uncertainty for so long. She couldn't bear to raise their hopes or deepen their pain without answers. On a crisp morning in September 2016, almost 12 years after Brian Donovan walked out of his family home for the last time, Detective Harlow stood watching as workers carefully removed sections of concrete from the mountain property. Her phone buzzed with a message from her team surveilling Nathan Weiss. He had just booked a last-minute flight to Bermuda, departing that evening. "Get a team to his house now," she ordered. "Don't let him leave the country." As the last piece of concrete was lifted away, revealing what lay beneath, Harlow's expression remained professional, masking the mix of vindication and sorrow she felt. After all these years, Brian Donovan would finally be coming home, though not in the way his family had prayed for. The news broke across Denver like a thunderclap. Nathan Weiss, pillar of the business community and philanthropist, arrested at Denver International Airport while attempting to board a private flight to Bermuda. The charges: embezzlement, fraud, and pending investigation into the disappearance of his former business partner, Brian Donovan. For most of Denver, it was shocking. For Rebecca Donovan, it was the beginning of answers she had both craved and dreaded for 12 long years. The concrete slab at the mountain property had concealed a makeshift vault containing not Brian's remains, as many had feared, but something perhaps equally damning: a waterproof case filled with original company documents, financial records, and a video recording that Brian had hidden there himself. "It appears Mr. Donovan suspected his life was in danger," Lieutenant Harlow explained to Rebecca in the quiet of her office, away from the media frenzy. "The evidence suggests he created this fail-safe, this time capsule of evidence, in case anything happened to him." The video, recorded just days before his disappearance, showed Brian sitting at his desk, his expression grave but determined. "If you're watching this," he began, "then Nathan has made his move, and I wasn't able to stop him." He detailed discovering that Nathan had been systematically embezzling from their company, using offshore accounts and falsified contracts. Brian had planned to confront him with a forensic audit, but wanted insurance, this buried evidence, in case things went wrong. What Brian couldn't have anticipated was that Nathan would discover his investigation. Phone records recovered during the new investigation revealed that someone had forwarded Brian's emails with the private investigator directly to Nathan's personal account the day before Brian disappeared. "We believe this person was Marianne Keller, who worked as an administrative assistant for both partners," Harlow explained. "She's admitted to providing Nathan access to Brian's emails in exchange for cash payments. She claims she didn't know what would happen next." For Emma and Tyler, now young adults at 20 and 18, the revelations brought a complex mix of emotions. The father they barely remembered had not abandoned them, as they had sometimes secretly feared during dark moments of childhood. He had been trying to expose wrongdoing, perhaps even protect them. "Dad was a hero," Tyler said quietly during a family meeting with Lieutenant Harlow. "He was trying to do the right thing." Emma, more pragmatic like her father, asked the question that hung heavy in the room. But what happened to him? Where is he? The answer came 3 days after Nathan's arrest. Facing mounting evidence and the possibility of a death penalty case if charged with murder, Nathan Weiss agreed to a plea deal. In exchange for prosecutors taking capital punishment off the table, he would provide a full confession and reveal the location of Brian Donovan's remains. Rebecca chose to hear the confession alone, asking even Lieutenant Harlow to leave the room. For 47 minutes, she sat across from the man who had attended her children's birthday parties, who had put his arm around her at the memorial service, who had looked into her eyes year after year and said, "We'll never stop looking for answers." What Nathan revealed was both calculated and impulsive. He had invited Brian to meet at their office building that day, ostensibly to discuss a new investor. When confronted about the embezzlement, Nathan had lashed out. There had been a struggle near the stairwell. Brian had fallen, or been pushed, down the concrete stairs. Rather than call for help, Nathan had made a decision that defined the next 12 years. He would make Brian disappear. Using the service elevator to avoid security cameras, he had transported Brian's body to a waiting car. The remote mountain property, purchased weeks earlier as a potential vacation home, became instead a permanent solution to his problem. When Rebecca emerged from the confession room, her face was pale but composed. To Harlow's questioning look, she simply nodded. "I know everything now." The following week, police recovered Brian's remains from a second location on the mountain property, far from the concrete slab where he had hidden his evidence. A proper burial, delayed by more than a decade, could finally take place. The media covered every angle of the story. The wealthy developer's fall from grace, the grieving family's long wait for justice, the dogged detective who never gave up. But these narratives couldn't capture the quiet moments that followed. Emma going through her father's old blueprints, discovering she had inherited his eye for design. Tyler finding comfort in joining a support group for children who had lost parents to violence. Rebecca finally removing her wedding ring, placing it in a box alongside the watch Brian had worn every day of their married life. On a clear autumn day in 2016, almost exactly 12 years after Brian vanished, the Donovans held a proper funeral. The attendance surprised even Rebecca, former colleagues, old friends, and many faces she didn't recognize. Among them was Michael Torres, the private investigator who had helped Brian gather evidence against Nathan. "I've carried this case with me every day," Torres told Rebecca after the service. "I always wondered if I could have done more, warned him somehow." "We all wonder that," she replied, squeezing his hand. "But Brian made his choice to stand up for what was right. That's the legacy he left for Emma and Tyler." In the years that followed, Nathan Weiss would be convicted and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Pinnacle Development would be restructured and renamed, with Rebecca taking a more active role in its management. The embezzled funds, much of which had been recovered from offshore accounts, would be reinvested into a foundation providing scholarships for children who had lost parents to violent crime. Lieutenant Sarah Harlow would be promoted again, her persistent work on the cold case becoming a model for the department. When asked by a reporter what had kept her committed to the Donovan case for so many years, she simply said, "Because someone had to remember, someone had to keep asking questions." As for the Donovan family, they found their way forward one day at a time. The questions that had haunted them for 12 years had been answered, though not in the way they had hoped during those early days of searching. There was grief in the certainty, but also relief, the particular relief that comes from replacing terrible unknowing with difficult truth. On what would have been Brian's 50th birthday, Rebecca, Emma, and Tyler hiked to a viewpoint overlooking the Denver skyline. The city had changed in the years since Brian had last seen it. New buildings, including the one his company had built, reaching toward the sky. "He would have loved this view," Rebecca said, her arm around Tyler's shoulders. Emma nodded, her father's blue eyes taking in the vista. "He can see it now." As the sun set over the Rocky Mountains, painting the city in shades of gold and amber, The three of them stood together, not at the end of their story, but somewhere in the middle of it, looking forward to what came next.